not include things that are not correct. All right. And we also have surrealism as a movement in the 20th century. And there are like a bunch of surrealistic plays that we can study maybe in the future. So surrealism itself is a French term. The word, or let's say the prefix sur means above, and then we have realism. It means above realism. So it means what we have is not realistic, but something in the imaginary world. For example, in the world of imagination, you can, for example, imagine hell or heaven to be in a certain way. So that is surrealistic because it doesn't exist in this world. So what these authors wanted to give to the readers, to the audience, was something that they fantasized about, something that they imagined, and it was, let's say, it was meant to illustrate or to simplify or to explain the complexities of human life, the complexities of reality. So in this way, most of writers, for example, someone like, let's say, Sartre, in his No Exit, he imagines hell to be a living room filled with heavy and, let's say, expensive furniture and a bunch of people who are just suffering not because of torture but because of themselves. So he wants to tell us that we are, let's say, punishers to each other. And he also expresses his very famous sentence in the play: hell is other people. So this is like an example of surrealism because we know that we've heard from the religious people that in hell people are punished, people are, for example, burned alive. I don't know. We have heard stories, lots of them. But in Sartre's version, they are just sitting in a living room and yet they become torturers for each other. And hopefully, we will study this play during this, let's say, this academic year. Another school or another movement was futurism. Futurism, we talked about their fears about robots, about the, let's say, the way that science takes over the world and controls, let's say, humans in several ways. So this is also related to that. As a movement, it emerged in Italy, 909, and it was somehow, let's say, related to machines, wars, and we also have fascism. Fascism is just like a dictatorship when we have, for example, a ruler who imposes him or herself on others. All right. And we have skepticism. So, by skepticism, we are talking about having doubts, to be skeptic about anything that you see or anything that you witness. So, this was, let's say, obvious in most of the literary works. And in most of them, the playwrights or the other writers, they try to refuse the standards, the things that people used to believe in. For example, it was out of skepticism that someone like Friedrich Nietzsche stood against church and the church people. It was out of skepticism that many other authors and writers, let's say, wrote against the standards that existed in the societies by the 19th century and early 20th century. So skepticism itself, it means to have doubts about anything or any rule or anything that people believe in normally. To be skeptic, to have questions or to question the authenticity of anything that you can, for example, let's say, get or see or read about in your life. All right. And we also have nihilism. Nihilism is like the rejection of morality and religion. It is closely related to skepticism, but still, it is more or less about morality or religion, these two, and they rejected the two of them. So, in most of the plays that we have in the modern age, you can tell there is no place for religion or morality. You see that the characters give absolutely no attention to each other. They don't respect each other, they don't treat each other well. They are harsh and they are, let's say, inhuman with each other. For example, in No Exit, we have three main characters, and these three are just abusing each other any way possible. So, this is because they no longer believe in morality, believe in religion, believe in the society, or in other people. Okay, so let's move on. We also have relativism. This is thanks to Albert Einstein. He said that all things that we have in this life are relative. That is to say, they are related to something else. For example, the way that I'm explaining this subject right now is relative or is related to the fact that we don't want students at the university due to the coronavirus. So we have to do this. And maybe my explanations are different from the ones that I usually give in my classes. And we all understand that. Right now, I'm talking to a computer. So it means that my performance is related to the setting, to the circumstances, and the which I'm doing myself, for example, or under which I'm making this performance. So the same thing applies on you guys. I usually say when students, for example, study online, we should consider the fact that they were just watching a video. They were not having an actual lecture inside the campus. So if there is, for example, a shortcome or something, we understand. We say it is because of that thing. So according to the relativists, anything that happens in human life is related to something else. And so nothing is fixed in this life. And everything can change from one person to another, from one occasion to another. So imagine when you have, for example, let's say this mentality that nothing is fixed. You can, for example, argue about anything, you can ask questions about anything, and you can doubt almost everything. So this is where, let's say, creativity starts to emerge, and this is where the problems start to emerge as well. At one, from one side, you become creative because you don't follow anyone, you don't follow any rules. At the same time, you turn into a rebel because you refuse everything and everyone. So this is what was really happening in the early 20th century, and that's why we have so many, let's say, schools, movements, so many different types and genres of literature. Okay, another school, existentialism. This one goes back to Soren Kierkegaard and Friedrich Nietzsche and the others in the century, in the early century, or let's say in the previous century. That would be better. So it is more or less about the existence of humans, the human life, how they live, how they behave, what they do, anything related to them in general. And in most cases, from an existential point of view, it's about the hopelessness or helplessness and sometimes even uselessness of humans. Guys, let me clarify this by giving you an example. Have you ever asked yourself this question: why do I live? Or what are the purposes in my life, of my life? And what should I do with my life, for example? Should I go to English department or to French department or to Kurdish department? Should I go outside and start working somewhere? So all these questions about yourself, your being, okay, can be thought of as existential questions because you talk about your own existence, you at this moment as a creature, as a species, okay? So this is what we have when we talk about existentialism. It is more or less asking questions about, let's say, yourself, your status, your position in this world. And we will have more to say about existentialism when we start studying No Exit by Sartre. Usually, before the play, I give a brief, I would say, description, or let's say a brief explanation, or let's say some points about existentialism in general. Okay, so and these are not the only movements, or let's say the only schools that we have in the 20th century. There are like hundreds. But I thought that these would be enough because we need realism, naturalism when you talk about Riders to the Sea. We need Marxism, which I didn't mention here because we talked about Karl Marx in detail. When we talk about warnings by, let's say, warnings by O'Neill. And then we will also need, let's say, surrealism and existentialism when we talk about No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre. So anyway, that's it concerning the introduction to the modern theater, the modern age. For the next lecture, we will start studying the first play, Riders to the Sea. I'm going to attach the text with this lecture so you can see the text and you will need to print it out if you want to, or you can use the electronic copy. So for the next week, hopefully we will start studying Riders to the Sea, and I want you to read about naturalism in general because it is completely naturalistic in nature. And if you had any questions or if there is anything that you didn't understand, you may leave a comment so I can include, for example, your answer with the next video, which would be for the next week. Have a great time and see you.